Okay, so picture this. A world just teeming with these colossal creatures, right?
Yeah,
They're
absolutely.
giant ground sloths,
Mm.
just lumbering through forests, woolly mammoths, shaking the earth with every step.
And saber-toothed cats prowling around these
Mm,
vast ancient landscapes.
exactly. Then, in what feels like, geologically speaking, just a blink of an eye,
Mm-hmm.
most of them vanished, just gone. And, as a history enthusiast, you're probably already asking, what happened? What exactly happened to these magnificent beasts?
That is really the enduring mystery, isn't it? And that's what we're diving into today. We're trying to unravel one of the most profound puzzles in natural history and archaeology,
Which is?
the late Quaternary Megafauna Extinction event. And this wasn't just some slow decline, it was really pivotal period when Earth witnessed this massive disappearance of its largest animals.
And it reshaped everything.
Profoundly reshaped ecosystems, yeah,
Yeah.
across entire continents.
And the big questions are just fascinating. Was it our early human ancestors, the first explorers moving into these new lands? Were they the cause of this widespread die-off?
Or was it the planet itself? Those dramatic shifts in climate coming out of the last ice age.
Right. Or maybe
Yeah.
it's not so simple. Like, maybe it's both, which is what modern science seems to be leaning towards more and more, right?
Exactly. A complex kind of nuanced interplay of both forces. So today we're going to explore all that, the controversies, the cutting-edge data.
And the really fascinating ways scientists are trying to piece this ancient puzzle together.
We've got a really compelling stack of sources to guide us through this. We're talking detailed archaeological reports from Mexico,
Okay.
genetic analyses of Ice Age rhinos dug up from Siberian permafrost,
Wow.
even global statistical studies that track, human population growth against the loss of these megafauna. We're going to sift through the evidence
Examine the competing hypotheses.
and uncover the latest scientific insights. Our mission today is really to give you a comprehensive, detailed, but also nuanced understanding of this incredible historical event.
So we'll unpack the main competing ideas, look at the revolutionary science being used.
Absolutely, and see what the past can teach us about right now, about our present and future, especially when we think about things like biodiversity and climate change.
So by the end of this deep dive, you'll not only get the complexities of this extinction event, but also appreciate why this ancient history holds really vital lessons for our world today.
Yeah, get ready for some serious aha moments, hopefully, and maybe a new perspective on, humanity's place in the Earth's long story.
Right, let's start at the beginning then. This Great Vanishing Act. For literally hundreds of millions of years, Earth's landscapes were full of megafauna.
Mm-hmm. And we define megafauna as large animals, typically weighing over 10 kilograms or about 22 pounds.
So not just mammoths, but a whole range of larger animals.
Exactly. And these giants, they were incredibly resilient. They thrived through all sorts of dramatic geological periods, multiple ice ages, warm periods.
They saw huge climate change before.
Absolutely, demonstrating remarkable adaptability.
So what makes this late Quaternary extinction, the LQE you called it, what makes it so different?
It's the speed and the scale. Despite that long history of resilience, within a relatively short geological window, mostly the last 50,000 years, we see this abrupt, dramatic decrease in their abundance and diversity.
So not just a normal fluctuation.
No, this represents an abnormal rate of megafaunal loss compared to previous periods. Something was fundamentally different this time.
And people noticed this even way back.
Oh, yes. The sheer scale of it was recognized as early as the 19th century. Early explanations, they included things like catastrophic climate events, maybe more gradual climate change.
And the idea of human hunters.
That idea was emerging then too, yes, that humans might be the primary cause. And this mystery has just continued to captivate and challenge scientists ever since.
So just how big was this extinction? What was the scope?
It was truly global, not just one area. In North America alone, a staggering 37 genera of large mammals vanished.
37 genera.
And South America, the toll was even higher. 52 genera disappeared there.
Unbelievable.
Globally, the estimate is around 1 billion individual large animals lost from the Earth's land surface. Just think about that number. An immense definition event.
Leaving huge gaps in the ecosystem.
Exactly. Ecological voids. And it wasn't random either. The extinctions were really severe and selective, disproportionately hitting the biggest of the big.
Like the mega herbivores. those over 1,000 kilos.
Precisely. The late Pleistocene had at least 50 distinct species of these massive terrestrial plant eaters. We're talking 16 species related to elephants, 7 species of things like camels and hippos, 9 rhino-like species.
And the weird American ones.
Yeah, unique groups in the Americas like 5 species of glyptodonts, think giant armadillos, 8 species of giant sloths, other extinct groups like toxodonts. Australia had its own unique giant marsupials too.
And how many of those 50 survive today?
Only 9, worldwide.
Yeah.
And their geographic ranges are just fractions of what they once were.
That's a shocking loss.
It is, and get this, 10 of the species that went extinct were actually larger than the largest land animal alive today, the African bush elephant.
Bigger than an elephant.
Bigger than today's biggest elephant. 8 of those were proboscideans, relatives of elephants. And the Americas, they got hit the hardest. All 27 megaherbivore species there vanished completely.
Just wiped out. What about the predators, the big carnivores?
Equally dramatic. The megacarnivores weighing 100 kilos or more. Globally, the late Pleistocene had 15 species of these mammal megacarnivores, 9 big cats, 5 types of bears, plus Australia's unique marsupial lion.
And today?
Only 6 of those species remain. North America alone once hosted 9 species of megacarnivores.
Like the saber-tooths.
Massive saber-tooths, yeah, maybe 200, 300 kilos. Huge lion relatives like Panthera, atrox 430 kilos, and the Eurasian cave lion. Plus the enormous short-faced bear, Arctodus semus, over 700 kilos.
And how many of those 9 North American giants survive?
Astonishingly none. 0. They all went extinct.
It's gone. And it wasn't just the absolute giants, right?
Yeah.
The intermediate sizes were hit, too.
Yes, significant losses there as well. Large herbivores between 44 and 999 kilograms. North America lost 23 out of 36 species in that range. South America lost 27 out of 38. Australia lost 20 out of 21.
So it's across the board for larger animals.
Pretty much. Recent analyses trying to account for biases in the fossil record show the LQE was an extinction spike. It surpassed all but one other extinction event in the previous 55 million years of mammal history in North America.
That really puts it in perspective. Exceptionally intense and highly selective for large size.
Exactly. And while we're mainly talking land animals today, it's worth mentioning the oceans quickly. Humans have hunted marine megafauna for millennia.
Whales, seals.
Right. But the really massive definition, the big declines and local wipeouts of marine mammals and fish, that's mostly happened in the last few centuries due to industrial whaling and fishing. It's a different, more recent timescale of major impact compared to the land extinctions we're focusing on, though some marine extinctions, like Steller's sea cow, did happen earlier.
Okay, so how do scientists try to explain this Great Vanishing Act? What are the main theories?
Well, for decades, the debate really centered on 2 dominant, often competing ideas.
The overkill hypothesis.
Right, which basically says early human hunters were the primary culprits.
And the climate change hypothesis.
Which points the finger at those dramatic environmental shifts happening at the end of the last ice age.
But you said science is moving beyond just picking one.
Increasingly, yes. Modern research is moving away from a simple either-or. Researchers are now often proposing a combined hypothesis, sometimes called the 1-2 punch model, meaning the extinctions likely resulted from a complex interplay. Human impacts and climatic changes, often working together, maybe amplifying each other's effects. It wasn't necessarily just one thing, but perhaps a combination of stressors that pushed these populations over the edge.
And new technologies helping sort this out.
Absolutely. That's what's really exciting. Revolutionary new tech and forensic methods are letting scientists reconstruct ancient diets, population dynamics, environmental conditions with incredible detail, things we couldn't even imagine doing not long ago.
Giving us much better data.
Crucial new data, yeah, which helps refine and sometimes even challenge those long-held assumptions about what happened.
And understanding this isn't just, historical curiosity.
Not at all. It offers really practical insights for today, for addressing challenges like biodiversity loss, climate change, ecosystem restoration, and what people are calling the Anthropocene, our current human-dominated era.
So lessons from the Ice Age can actually help us now.
Directly inform our actions today, yes.
Okay, let's dive into those major hypotheses then, starting with overkill humans as the primary force.
Right. This idea, most famously articulated by Paul Martin, suggests that the rapid expansion of human populations into previously uninhabited territories, virgin lands, essentially was the main trigger.
Why would that be so catastrophic?
The core idea is that the megafauna in these regions were naive. They had no evolutionary history of dealing with humans as predators. They simply didn't recognize the danger from this new, highly effective hunter.
So humans arrive, and they're like super predators.
Exactly. Newly arrived hunters, like the fast-moving Clovis groups in North America, are seen as highly effective, generalist super predators. They could take down even the biggest mammals, animals that maybe didn't have many natural predators before.
And because humans are omnivores.
That's critical. As omnivores and generalist foragers, humans could keep hunting pressure high even if one particular megafauna species started getting scarce. They could just switch to smaller game, fish, plants.
Unlike a wolf that might starve if its main prey disappears.
Precisely. Humans could maintain the pressure relentlessly.
And the megafauna themselves were particularly vulnerable.
Inherently so, yes. Large-bodied species are just more susceptible to extinction, even from moderate but sustained increases in mortality.
Why is that?
It comes down to their life history. They have long generation times, meaning it takes a long time to reach reproductive age. And they have slow reproductive rates, often just one baby per female per year, sometimes even less often.
So low birth rates.
Very low fecundity, yes. That means their populations simply cannot bounce back quickly from declines caused by things like hunting.
Which leads to this blitzkrieg idea.
Exactly. The hypothesis suggests a blitzkrieg model where, soon after humans arrive in a new territory, megafauna populations start crashing rapidly within maybe a few hundred to a few thousand years. And that initial decline quickly leads to extinction across the whole genus.
What's the evidence for this rapid timing?
A key line of evidence is the remarkable correlation between the estimated dates of human arrival on different continents and islands and the timing of the start of the megafauna extinctions there.
You see a pattern globally.
You do. For instance, take Australia. The estimated human arrival time, around 50,000 years ago, exactly matches the dates for the beginning of the Australian megafauna extinction event.
That's a strong correlation.
It's considered powerful evidence. And you see the flip side, too. Look at Tasmania. Megafauna extinction happened later there because humans only arrived later when the land bridge was exposed. Or those terrestrial turtles on a southwest Pacific island.
The ones that survived longer.
Much longer. Because they were isolated from humans. They went extinct only about 300 years after the first people arrived on that island, around 300 years ago. It's a clear cause and effect in a previously virgin territory.
What about the Americas?
A similar pattern. The main period of megafauna loss, roughly 15,500 to 11,500 years ago, closely follows the estimated arrival time of Homo sapiens.
There's a geographical pattern, too.
Yes. Direct carbon dates on megafauna remains across the Americas show a decline that moves from north to south over time. That pattern is consistent with the dates for the first significant human presence spreading across the continent.
So the idea is, once humans populated the whole world,
the quaternary megafaunal extinction event was largely completed. Shortly after humans migrated throughout and inhabited the entire globe.
There's a visual for this, right? A graph.
Yes, figure 1 in one of our key sources titled Megafauna Loss versus Global Human Population Growth. It really tells the story visually.
What does it show?
Imagine a graph with time on the bottom, going from 100,000 years ago to 1,000 years ago. On the left side, you have the number of megafauna species, shown by a red line. On the right, you have the human population, shown by a blue line.
And what happens?
The red line, megafauna species, takes a sharp nosedive over this period. At the same time, the blue line, human population, shows this dramatic exponential increase. They move in opposite directions.
An inverse relationship.
A very clear inverse relationship. And the graph specifically marks the time windows for major megafauna decline. Australia starting over 50,000 years ago, Eurasia Beringia between 50,000 and 15,500 years ago, and the Americas really crashing from 15,500 to 11,500 years ago onwards.
And these declines consistently line up with human expansion.
Exactly. It's a powerful visual argument for that causal link.
This correlation also helps explain the exceptions, doesn't it? Like Africa and Eurasia.
It does. Why did they experience fewer extinctions? Well, Africa is where modern Homo sapiens originated.
So megafauna there had a long time to adapt.
Hundreds of thousands of years of coevolution. This allowed African megafauna to develop survival techniques, to learn to coexist with humans, making them less vulnerable than the naive animals elsewhere.
And Eurasia?
A somewhat similar situation is proposed. Other species of Homo, besides Homo sapiens, had been present in Eurasia for very long periods. So the megafauna there also had a longer history of interaction and gradual coevolution, rather than a sudden shock from a brand new superpredator.
Okay, so the human factor, the overkill hypothesis, has some strong arguments based on timing and global patterns.
Definitely.
But let's flip the coin. What about the climate change hypothesis? The idea that it was environmental catastrophe driving these extinctions.
Right. The core argument here is that those dramatic, rapid environmental shifts happening as the planet transitioned out of the last glacial period into the current interglacial period, that these changes were just too severe for many megafauna species.
Too fast, too extreme.
Exactly. That the environmental changes themselves directly caused the extinctions.
And like overkill, this relies heavily on timing.
Yes, correlating megafauna extinction dates and locations with the timing and patterns of significant climate swings is crucial evidence here, too.
Any examples?
Well, a study on mammoth populations in Siberia during the end of the Pleistocene found that their population ups and downs corresponded pretty closely with large-scale climate cycles, like the Milankovitch cycles.
Those long-term orbital changes affecting climate.
Right. And also with smaller, faster millennium-scale climate cycles, showing a clear link between climate and mammoth numbers.
In the period after the deepest cold, the last glacial maximum.
That also lines up. The LGM was roughly 23,000 to 15,000 years ago. After it ended, mammoth populations in Siberia experienced a really dramatic decrease, ultimately leading to their extinction there.
Suggesting the shift out of the extreme cold was the problem.
It suggests that the transition into a warmer but perhaps more unstable or different kind of climate was too challenging for these cold-adapted giants.
But hadn't megafauna survived big climate swings before? Lots of ice ages came and went.
That's the critical point for the climate change argument. Proponents need to show that the climate changes around the time of the LQE were somehow unprecedented in their severity or speed compared to earlier cycles that megafauna did survive.
So was the Pleistocene-Holocene transition uniquely harsh?
That's the argument. That the specific conditions this time were different, perhaps faster or involving different vegetation shifts, making it uniquely difficult for megafauna to cope, even if they'd weathered previous storms.
Is there a specific case study that really highlights this climate argument?
The woolly rhinoceros is often cited as a strong case, a real icon of the Ice Age, right? Humans were painting them on cave walls in France 30,000 years ago.
So humans and rhinos coexisted for a long time.
For millennia. Yet the rhinos went extinct around 14,000 years ago. So the question was, did their population decline start when humans showed up 30,000 years ago, or when the planet experienced that rapid warming around 14,000 years ago?
How did they figure that out?
Genetics. Paleogeneticists, led by Lev Dalen, went looking for really good quality woolly rhino DNA in the Siberian permafrost.
Which is thawing now, making finds more common but also more degraded.
Exactly, a challenge. They managed to sequence the mitochondrial genomes from 14 samples, including a mummified baby rhino and even a scrap of rhino meat from the stomach of an Ice Age puppy.
Amazing. And what did the DNA show?
They were looking at genetic diversity as a proxy for population health. A key finding came from an 18,500-year-old bone sample. It showed strong genetic diversity.
Meaning the population was healthy then.
Relatively stable and healthy, yes. It lacked the signs of inbreeding, like duplicate gene sections that you see in populations under stress or in decline.
So if they were healthy 18,500 years ago, but extinct by 14,000 years ago.
It implies the population crash must have happened very quickly, sometime in that 4,500-year window between 18,500 and 14,000 years ago.
And that window lines up better with
the rapid warming period around 14,000 years ago, more so than with the initial human presence thousands of years earlier.
So the conclusion for the woolly rhino was?
Paleontologist Grant Zazula summed it up nicely. The paper shows that woolly rhino coexisted with people for millennia without any significant impact on their population. Then all of a sudden the climate changed and they went extinct.
That's a pretty strong case for climate being the main driver, at least for that species.
It powerfully suggests that rapid climate change, not human hunting, was the dominant factor in that specific extinction. Of course, scientists hope to find even more recent samples to really pinpoint the decline.
There's a modern parallel here.
A crucial lesson, yes. The rapid warming seen then is similar in pace to what we're experiencing now, and it could have similarly devastating consequences for Arctic species today. It's a stark reminder of Earth's sometimes fickle climate.
Okay, so we have these two major camps. Overkill, focusing on human impact, and climate change, focusing on environmental shifts, and growing evidence that it might be a combination. Let's dig deeper into that interaction now by looking at specific archaeological evidence. How about we head to ancient Mexico? What do the records there tell us about how humans and megafauna actually interacted on the ground?
Right. Mexico provides some really valuable windows, although it's important to stress the evidence we have is still geographically patchy. There are large areas we still know very little about.
But where we do have evidence,
It's fascinating. Interaction with horses, equus species, seems to have been pretty widespread.
okay,
At La Morita, a site in Nuevo Leon, dated to around 9,000, 11,500 years ago, they found charcoal alongside horse remains showing polished bones and burned molars.
polished and burned. That sounds deliberate.
Very strongly suggests direct human processing, butchering, cooking, using the carcasses. Then at Los Grifos, an older site in Chiapas, over 23,000 years old.
Wow, that's early.
It is. And there, they found distinct stone tools, scrapers, even a projectile point directly associated with horse remains. Clear evidence of a human-horse encounter, very likely hunting.
So horses were definitely on the menu, or at least interacted with significantly. What about other megafauna?
We have direct evidence for butchery on giant ground sloths, too. At Chizumba, Oaxaca, there's a sloth bone dated around 20,000 years ago with a clear cut mark, tangible proof of human modification.
Cut marks are pretty definitive.
They are strong indicators. And overall, the analysis suggests that American artiodactyls, the even-toed ungulates like ancient bison, camels must have been valuable prey resources for humans during the terminal Pleistocene.
For food or other materials?
Both likely. We see evidence of interaction with various families, including relatives of sheep and bison and ancient camels, across a wide geographical range.
Does the Mexican record also show species disappearing from certain areas, local extinctions?
Yes, it highlights that. For example, bighorn sheep and pronghorn remains have been found alongside human evidence in places like the Trans-Mexican Volcanic Belt and the Sierra Madre Oriental provinces.
But they aren't found there today.
Exactly. They're now locally extinct or extirpated from those specific regions, suggesting a change since the Pleistocene.
What about the really big ones? The elephants and their relatives?
In Mexico, the record mainly shows two genera, Cuvironeus, the Gumphotheres, and Mammuthus, the mammoths.
Any interactions found?
Interestingly, the northwest region of Mexico holds the only record in all of North America of humans associated with Gumphothers.
Really? Just that one spot?
According to this review, yes, making that area uniquely important for understanding that specific interaction. Mammoth interactions, on the other hand, are much more abundant in the record.
Where are those found?
Concentrated primarily in the northeast of Mexico and also extending into that trans-Mexican volcanic belt region. There are numerous sites showing human-mammoth interactions which have been studied in detail previously.
So that volcanic belt seems like a real hot spot.
It likely was. During the late Pleistocene, it was probably a significant resource hub and also a vital transit point for both human groups moving through the landscape and for megafaunal migrations.
Making it a prime location for encounters.
Intense encounters and interactions, yes.
What about the big predators? Saber-tooth cats, giant bears. Did humans interact with them in Mexico?
The records show intriguing encounters, yes. Remains of megabaric carnivores like Smilodon, saber-tooth, and bears, Ursus americanus, the black bear, and Arctodus simus, the short-faced bear, are found.
Where?
Both in caves, like the famous Hoyo Negro site or Chalchihuit Cave, and in open-air sites like Santa Lucia, Thi, and Tlapacoya.
So humans and these giant predators were using the same spaces.
They were definitely in the same locations, sometimes even in the same geological layers. But here's the interesting part, something that forces us to consider the implications.
What is it?
There's a consistent lack of evidence for direct interaction or competition for carcasses between humans and these predators.
So no signs of humans butchering saber-tooths or fighting bears over a kill?
Generally, no. What the evidence usually shows is human presence and the faunal remains of these carnivores occurring in the same context, like both falling into the Hoyo Negro cenote or in the same stratigraphic layer, like a Chalchihuit Cave or Tlapacoya.
Give me an example.
At Chalchihuit Cave, they found 3 limestone flakes, likely human-made, in the same layer as a bear baculum, a penis bone, and some burnt plant matter, possibly brought by people, but no cut marks on the bear bones themselves.
So they were around each other, but maybe avoiding direct conflict, or the evidence just hasn't been found.
It raises critical questions, doesn't it, about the subsistence strategies, the sheltering strategies of the first hominins in the Americas. How did they navigate a landscape with these formidable predators? What was the nature of their competition for resources like caves or carcasses?
The predators must have influenced human behavior, even without direct fights.
Undoubtedly. Their presence would have shaped where people went, how they hunted, how they protected themselves. It's noted that the large fossil record of carnivores from some localities suggests these interactions must have been important, yet they've often been left aside for preservation reasons, highlighting a potential gap in research focus.
So shifting focus slightly, how did the specific ecology of Mexico shape human strategies back then?
Ecological factors were huge. The availability of food sources was clearly a critical determinant of where early humans were and how they lived in late Pleistocene Mexico.
Makes sense. You follow the food.
Exactly. And for human groups, the effective resource accessibility of game, basically, how much time and effort it took to hunt large group-living animals in open areas versus other prey became a crucial consideration. It determined how mobile they needed to be, their extensive logistical mobility.
Did hunting strategies vary by region?
It appears so. In areas like the Sierra Madre Oriental and the Yucatan Peninsula lowlands, hunters seem to have adopted a more diversified strategy.
Not just big game.
No, relying on a high diversity of taxa from both closed forests and more semi-open habitats. This included smaller animals like peccaries, alongside larger game like bighorn sheep, camels, and horses, plus other medium and small species. Some of these accumulated in natural traps, like Hoyo Negro again.
So the local environment really dictated the approach.
It indicates that hunting practices and the overall subsistence economy were most likely determined or strongly influenced by the convergence of geophysical and environmental factors, things like latitude, water availability, soil types, the specific plants and animals present, maybe even cultural diversity between different human groups.
That's a complex picture.
Very. Researchers advocate using morphotectonic provinces, areas defined by their geological and landform characteristics, as a better framework than just broad faunal provinces to understand these local variations and avoid overgeneralizing.
And based on current evidence, which areas saw the most consistent human occupation?
The Trans-Mexican Volcanic Belt, the Sierra Madre Oriental, and the Yucatan Peninsula lowlands might have experienced a longer and more consistent occupation. They seem to act as key vertices of human occupation.
Maybe migration quarters.
Exactly. The human-megafauna interactions around these provinces could correspond to the natural passage of human groups following faunal dispersal routes. Conversely, the central highlands of Mexico might have acted as a kind of natural barrier, limiting the movement of both megafauna and early humans.
But we still have gaps in understanding, right? About settlement patterns.
Definitely. Despite all this, the existing evidence in Mexico, except for a few exceptions, doesn't yet allow researchers to recognize really consistent settlement patterns. We can't definitively say if sites were temporary campsites, kill sites, or more permanent base camps.
And what's needed to figure that out?
A critical limitation mentioned is the lack of detailed taphonomic studies.
Taphonomy, the study of how things fossilize.
Right. And in this context, it's necessary to figure out if archaeological deposits represent primary access, meaning humans were the first to get the prey, likely through hunting, or secondary access, meaning humans scavenged carcasses perhaps killed by predators or natural causes.
How do you tell the difference?
It requires things like new technologies and methods such as scalar microscopy to look at bone modifications at a microscopic level, and detailed site analyses looking at things like the seasonality of hunting or the age of the animals being selected.
So there's still a lot of detailed work to be done.
Absolutely. This specific review aimed to be the first overall critical review of human megafaunal interactions in Mexico to get a clearer picture, focusing specifically on faunal remains found in archaeological contexts that allow for a direct assessment of the species selected by human groups.
Meaning some evidence was excluded.
Yes, it explicitly didn't include evidence of groups relying mainly on aquatic resources, like shell middens in Baja California. Or things like isolated projectile points found out of context, or sites that simply didn't report megafauna remains. The focus was on direct association.
What about human remains found with megafauna?
That was addressed. A significant number of early human skeletons have been found in submerged contexts, especially caves along the east coast of the Yucatan Peninsula.
Submerged caves, like Hoyo Negro.
Exactly. In the Tulum area, remains of at least 10 individuals have been identified, dating to that critical Pleistocene-Holocene transition period, roughly 13,000 to 8,000 years ago.
Wow, 10 individuals.
And some direct radiocarbon dates on prehistoric human samples from central Mexico are among the earliest in the Americas, dating back to around 12,600 calibrated years ago.
So definitely people there living alongside these large animals.
A substantial human presence, yes, contemporaneous with the megafauna.
Okay, this perfectly sets the stage for looking at the modern scientific approaches being used to untangle this complex story. These revolutionary micro-methods in paleoarchaeology.
Yes, this is where things get really exciting. The old debate, often simplified down to just humans or climate change, is being fundamentally reshaped by a whole suite of novel approaches and micro-methods.
What are these doing differently?
They're generating incredibly high-resolution data sets. This allows for much more context and species-specific understandings of things like extinction timing, population dynamics, and the ancient environments themselves.
Moving beyond broad generalizations.
Exactly. Fostering compelling new questions, especially about species-level biology and vulnerability, and how the whole ecosystem responded. These new lab methods don't just enrich the detail for archaeologists and paleontologists.
They have relevance today.
Directly. They allow studies of past megafauna to actively inform conservation science and environmental sustainability. What we learn about past extinctions can help us manage ecosystems now. Plus, this kind of detailed research will help with larger-scale synthetic efforts to draw broad lessons across different times and places.
Let's get into some specifics. Precision in chronology, you mentioned advanced radiocarbon dating.
Right. Radiocarbon dating is still the foundation, but new advancements are making it much more accurate and reliable. One key innovation is hydroxyproline dating.
Hydroxy what?
Hydroxyproline. It's an amino acid that's rarely found outside of bone collagen, and it's incredibly resistant to decay or contamination.
Making it a really pure signal for dating.
Exactly. It's considered a gold standard for chronological accuracy. Using this method has enabled researchers to generate even more reliable chronologies for megafaunal extinctions.
And has it changed our understanding of when things went extinct?
It has yielded some surprising results. For instance, using hydroxyproline dating on Western camel remains from Beringia pushed back their local disappearance date to around 50,000 years ago.
50,000. That's much earlier than humans arrived there, right?
Much earlier. Humans didn't appear significantly in that region until maybe around 20,000 years ago. So this new chronology suggests the camels disappeared due to climate change and habitat shrinking, not because of humans, directly challenging previous assumptions for that species in that location.
So refining the dates can completely change the story for a particular species?
Absolutely. Now, hydroxyproline dating has a limitation. It analyzes only a tiny fraction of the material, so it's tough for small or degraded samples.
So what's the alternative?
There's another technique called the XAD2 resin technique. Basically, you pass the hydrolyzed collagen sample through a special resin that grabs onto contaminants.
Cleaning up the sample before dating.
Precisely. It's particularly effective at removing exogenous contaminants that could mess up the date.
Has this been applied wisely?
It's been used, for example, at sites in Australia. And there, it critically called into question some previously accepted Holocene age radiocarbon dates on megafauna.
Dates that suggested megafauna survived much later alongside humans.
Exactly. Those older dates implied a longer period of coexistence. But with greater confidence in radiocarbon ages from these refined methods, especially near the limit of radiocarbon dating, we can now have more robust interpretations of when the last individuals of a species were around relative to human presence and climate shifts.
Okay, so dating is getting much more precise. What about figuring out what these animals ate and where they lived? Stable isotope analysis.
Yes, this is like dietary detective work. Stable isotope analysis of animal tissues, bone, teeth, hair has been used for a while in ecology and archaeology.
For looking at environment and diet changes over time.
Right. The basic principles of using stable carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, strontium isotopes are pretty well known. But it's only more recently that these methods have been used to get at the really fine-grained details of megafaunal paleoecology.
What kind of details?
Stable carbon, 13C, oxygen, HNO, and nitrogen isotopes can now provide significant physiological and ecological insights, even from analyzing just one species or even one individual animal over time.
Like the moa in New Zealand.
Good example. Researchers use stable carbon and nitrogen from the bone collagen of different moa species to meticulously tease apart differences in dietary and environmental preferences. They could even compare these isotopic results with other evidence, like coprolite's fossilized dung or actual gut
To
contents.
see exactly what plants they preferred.
Exactly, and distinguish whether the isotope signal in the bone was reflecting diet or the broader environment.
Can you get even more detailed, like seasonal changes?
Amazingly, yes. A study did intensive sampling of stable carbon and oxygen isotopes down the length of a 27,000-year-old Erimotherium, that's a giant ground sloth tooth from Belize.
Sampling the tooth layer by layer as it grew.
Essentially, yes. And this detailed analysis remarkably showed how that single sloth varied its diet in response to seasonal fluctuations within a single year.
Wow. So it adapted its diet seasonally.
It provides high-resolution evidence for the ability of this species to adapt to climate-driven vegetation changes on a very fine timescale.
That's incredible detail. Can isotopes tell us about movement too, migration?
They can. Stable carbon, oxygen, and especially strontium, using the 87 SR86 SR ratio isotopes, when measured on sequentially growing tissues like teeth, can track mobility and ranging behavior.
How does strontium work for that?
Strontium isotopes in rocks vary geographically. Animals incorporate the local strontium signature into their bones and teeth through the plants and water they consume. By analyzing the changing strontium signature along a tooth, you can see if an animal moved between different geological regions during its life.
So you can see if they migrated seasonally or stayed put?
Exactly. For example, a study on wild horse and deer teeth from late Pleistocene Italy showed that deer ranged more widely than wild horse. But interestingly, both species stayed within a relatively circumscribed area all year.
Which meant
Paradoxically, it provided human hunters with a stable, though vulnerable, resource because the animals weren't constantly moving huge distances.
any examples contradicting previous ideas?
Yes, in Florida, mammoth tooth enamel analysis using strontium suggested restricted megafaunal ranging. This went against older ideas that mammoths undertook wide migrations like modern elephants. It implies maybe they were stuck in climatic refugia.
Making them potentially more vulnerable if that refuge changed or humans found it.
Potentially, yes. And in Australia, analysis of a single incisor from Diprotodon optatum, the giant wombat relative, suggested seasonal migrations between regions with different isotopic signatures.
And the really powerful thing is linking animal movement to human movement.
That's the potential holy grail. Linking these megafaunal mobility studies using strontium to strontium isotope evidence from human remains or tools to understand their hunting ranges. This lets you assess the potential impact and encounter rate between specific human groups and specific megafauna species across a landscape.
A truly holistic view of the dynamic.
That's the goal.
Okay, beyond isotopes, what about genetics and proteins, ancient DNA or aDNA?
aDNA is a game changer. Its application, alongside other paleontological and archaeological data, offers a clear analytical path toward understanding megafauna disappearance.
It's had success in other areas.
Stunning success. Think about resolving the relationship between Neanderthals and modern humans. aDNA was key. It has immense potential for megafauna research, too.
What does it reveal about megafauna?
It shows a pronounced dynamicism of genetic population structures over time. Populations weren't static. And critically, it reveals a progressive loss of genetic diversity in many megafauna species towards the end of the Pleistocene.
Even in species that survived.
Yes, though the loss was often more pronounced in those that went extinct. But it shows populations were likely under stress before the final curtain call. aDNA preserves best in cold, stable places, but where we can get it, it provides incredibly deep insights. Authentication is critical, of course.
What if DNA doesn't preserve? Are proteins an alternative?
They are an emerging and very promising field. Ancient proteins, or paleoproteomics. Fewer studies have used it for extinction questions so far, but its potential is huge, especially given that protein molecules tend to preserve longer term relative to DNA.
So you could get information from warmer or wetter places where DNA degrades quickly.
Exactly. Proteins are accessible from a wider range of environments, potentially opening up many more sites and samples for molecular analysis.
Is there a key technique here?
One important one is called collagen peptide mass fingerprinting, often known as ZOOMS, that's zooarchaeology, by mass spectrometry.
What does ZOOMS do?
It uses mass spectrometry to analyze collagen, the main protein in bone, dentine, skin, antler. It creates a kind of fingerprint that allows you to quickly and efficiently identify the taxonomic group, sometimes even the species the tissue came from.
Even from tiny fragments you couldn't identify visually.
Precisely. Much like DNA metabarcoding, ZoomS enables large-scale screening of morphologically unidentifiable bones from archaeological sites. You can specifically search for the presence of rare or extinct megafaunal taxa within huge bone assemblages.
And it doesn't destroy the sample.
That's a huge advantage. It's minimally destructive.
Yeah.
So after you do ZoomS, you can often still do radiocarbon dating, isotope analysis, or even try for aDNA on the same precious sample.
This is a fast, cheap way to screen lots of material first.
Right. It promises to drastically increase the quantity and diversity of megafaunal taxa identified in late Quaternary sites worldwide, which will significantly improve our analyses of how regional faunas changed over time.
Okay, one more micromethod, the dung fungus spores. This sounds interesting.
It is insightful, though sometimes controversial. It uses spores from coprophilous fungi that specifically grow on animal dung.
How does that help?
Modern studies show that the abundance of spores from certain dung fungi, like Spormiella, though its taxonomy is debated, sometimes referred to as Priatia, found in sediment cores alongside pollen, can be used to evaluate herbivore presence and abundance.
So more spores means more big herbivores were around pooping.
That's the basic idea. These spores have been used as a proxy for megafaunal biomass, allowing researchers to infer changes in the overall population density of large herbivores across different regions, both continents and islands.
Can you combine this with other data?
Yes, and that's when it's most powerful. For example, a study at Silver Lake, Ohio, used a multi-proxy analysis. They looked at dung fungus spores, pollen, charcoal, sediment chemistry, and radiocarbon dates all together.
To get a really detailed picture.
Exactly. Providing fine-grained insights into the interactions between megafauna, climate, and vegetation during the extinction process, it's also been used effectively for tracking avian megafauna like the moa in New Zealand.
Why is it controversial?
Well, the taxonomy of the fungi can be debated, how to accurately identify the spores. Also, interpreting the accumulation rates, how many spores end up in the sediment, can be tricky depending on local water conditions and sedimentation rates. It's all subject to debate.
But still potentially useful.
Despite the challenges, yes, especially when combined with other paleoenvironmental indicators like pollen or even sedimentary DNA. It holds significant promise for making more robust inferences about past megafaunal abundance from sediment records.
All right. We've covered the sheer scale of the extinction, the big competing ideas of overkill and climate change, and now these amazing new scientific tools, precise dating, isotopes, DNA, proteins, even dung fungus that are letting us probe this mystery like never before. Let's pivot now and look at the concrete evidence coming from different continents, really digging into the details that support or challenge these hypotheses. Let's start back in North America with the Clovis culture and its legacy.
Right. North America is central to the debate, partly because the appearance of the Clovis culture seems to coincide so closely with the megafaunal extinctions there.
Who were the Clovis people?
They represent one of the earliest, widely recognized and widespread human groups across North America. They appear in the archaeological record roughly 13,050 to 12,750 calibrated years before present.
And their lifestyle.
They're widely understood to have been highly mobile hunter-gatherers with a significant reliance on hunting big game, the megafauna.
Especially mammoths. That's the classic image.
They definitely had a strong association with mammoths, yes. And to a lesser extent with mastodons, gomphoters, ancient bison, and horses. Though they certainly ate smaller animals and plants too.
That Dent site in Colorado is famous for this, right?
Historically very significant, yes. It was the first known site where Clovis points were found clearly and directly associated with mammoth bones. It really cemented that image of Clovis as specialized mammoth hunters. One researcher, Gary Haynes, even joked the points should have been called Dent points instead of Clovis.
So the big question, did Clovis hunters cause the extinctions?
That remains a major point of ongoing controversy, but the timing is compelling. The extinction of at least 15 megafauna species seems to coincide with the appearance and spread of Clovis-style tools, happening between about 13,500 and 11,500 years ago, right around the time of the Younger Dryas climate event.
Is there direct human evidence linked to Clovis?
One crucial piece is the Anzac I burial in Montana, the remains of a young boy found buried with Clovis tools. It's the only known human burial directly associated with the culture.
And genetics links Anzac I to?
To some modern Native American populations, primarily in Central and South America, providing a direct biological link between the Clovis people and later indigenous groups.
What happened to the Clovis culture itself? Did it vanish with the megafauna?
It seems to have ended or perhaps transitioned around 12,750, 12,600 years ago. It gave way to more regionalized Paleo-Indian cultures across North America, like the Folsom tradition, which focused more on bison.
Why the change?
It might have been influenced by the decline of the very megafauna that Clovis people hunted, perhaps combined with decreasing human mobility as populations grew or environments changed. It looks more like normal cultural change and adaptation over time, rather than some catastrophic collapse of the Clovis people themselves.
Let's talk about their tools. What makes a Clovis point so distinctive?
The most recognizable feature is that lithic projectile point, the Clovis point. It's bifacial, meaning flakes were removed from both faces to shape it. And uniquely, it's fluted.
Fluted, what does that mean?
It means a long, channel-like flake was removed from the base upwards, on one or usually both sides. This flute typically extends up maybe a third, sometimes even half, of the point's total length. That specific fluting technique is a key identifier, differentiating them from later points where the flute might run the whole length, for example.
What do they look like otherwise?
Generally parallel-sided or slightly convex with a concave base. They vary a lot in size, though. The biggest ones can be over 10 centimeters, nearly 4 inches long.
And how are they used? Spear tips.
That's the common belief, yes. Tips for spears or maybe darts used with an atlatl or spear thrower, likely used as handheld thrusting weapons or thrown weapons for hunting big game and maybe defense, too.
Were they just spear points?
Interestingly, no, where patterns on some Clovis points show they were multifunctional, they were also used as cutting and slicing tools. Some researchers even think certain types were primarily designed and used as knives.
Were they easy to make?
Definitely not. They required considerable effort and skill, and they frequently broke during the napping process, especially during that tricky fluting stage.
Why flute them then? Was it practical?
That's debated. It might have acted as a shock absorber during impact, making the point more durable, or it could have been purely stylistic, a cultural marker. Or, perhaps most likely, it was designed to help haft the point more securely to the spear shaft.
What kind of stone did they use?
Generally high-quality stone, like chert or flint, silicious cryptocrystalline rocks. They followed a precise manufacturing sequence, thinning the preform, shaping with percussion flaking, and then finishing the edges with pressure flaking before the final fluting attempt.
You mentioned something about caching. Clovis people hiding tools.
Yes, that's a distinctive feature of Clovis culture, not really seen in later groups. Caching involved deliberately placing a collection of artifacts, usually stone tools like finished Clovis points or bifacial preforms at a specific spot. The presumed idea was they intended to come back and retrieve them later, sort of like a hidden toolkit or supply depot. Although some researchers interpret these caches as having ritualistic significance as well. Over 20 caches have been found across North America, offering insights into Clovis mobility, planning, and resource management.
Okay, so we have the tools, the sites. But is there really direct proof of Clovis people hunting these specific extinct animals, like beyond finding points near bones?
For a long time, that direct link was debated. But now, yes, thanks to novel applications of forensic methods, specifically blood residue analyses.
Finding ancient blood on stone tools.
Exactly. It's provided unambiguous, crucial proof of direct contact between Paleo-Indian stone tools and the blood proteins of ancient animals in eastern North America, going back 13,000 years. A huge leap forward.
What specific animals did they find blood from?
The results gave us the first direct evidence on ancient stone tools of the blood of extinct mammoth or mastodon, as well as the extinct North American horse, found on Paleo-Indian artifacts in the Carolinas.
Wow. So that confirms it. They were interacting directly.
It confirms these megafaunas were present in that region when early Paleo-Indians were there, and that they were actively hunted or scavenged by these groups. You can't get much more direct than the animal's blood on the weapon.
Did they find blood from other animals too?
Interestingly, yes. Ancient bison blood residues from the Bovidae family were actually the most common finding on these tools.
Which fits with other evidence suggesting bison were important prey.
It does. It adds to earlier blood residue work suggesting a focus on bison hunting by Clovis and other Paleo-Indian cultures. And remember, bison didn't go extinct in North America. They just got smaller, likely adapting to the warming climate.
So what does this blood residue evidence mean for the extinction debate overall? Does it prove overkill?
It does not prove humans were responsible for the extinctions entirely, but it strongly demonstrates that Early Paleo-Indians across the continent likely hunted or scavenged these animals at least occasionally.
And crucially, it confirms the timing.
Yes. The results show that ancient mammoths, mastodons, and horses were present when Clovis people were in these regions, just a few hundred years before these animals' eventual extinction in North America. It pins them together in time and space.
Was there anything interesting about which tools had which blood?
There is another interesting finding regarding the timing. Mammoth or mastodon blood residues were primarily found on Clovis artifacts, but ancient horse blood residues were found not only on Clovis points, but also on Paleo-Indian points that are slightly more recent than Clovis points.
What might that suggest?
It may suggest that the extinctions of mammoths and mastodons were perhaps more complete in this specific region by the end of the Clovis period itself, whereas the extinction of the Ice Age horse species perhaps took longer, lingering a bit after the main Clovis era. It hints at potentially different extinction trajectories for different species.
Fascinating details. Okay, let's move beyond North America now. Where else do we see signatures potentially pointing towards overkill? Australia.
Australia provides really compelling evidence supporting the overkill hypothesis, independent of the Americas. As we mentioned, that estimated human arrival around 50,000 years ago is exactly matched by the dates for the start of the Australian megafauna extinction. The timing is key.
Is there more direct evidence there, like kill sites?
At the Cud Spring site in Australia, yes, they found highly compelling evidence. Things like man-made tools specialized for large game hunting and on-site butchering.
Found with the bones.
Found stratigraphically positioned below, above, and beside the bones of megafauna, indicating a direct association in time. And even more telling, some of the megafaunal bones at Cud Springs even show scars from being cut.
Actual butchery marks.
Direct, tangible proof that at least humans played a role in the demise of these large creatures. It offers powerful evidence supporting the overkill hypothesis in the Australian context.
And you mentioned that island example earlier, the turtles.
Right, the small island in the southwest Pacific near Australia, where remains of terrestrial turtles were found within human midden heaps, basically trash piles, and even used as a base layer in a human cemetery.
Suggesting they were eaten?
Yes, the skeletal remains were notably biased toward the more fleshy parts, the bits people would commonly eat. But the really noteworthy thing is the age these turtle remains date to only about 3,000 years ago.
Much later than the mainland extinction.
Well into the Holocene, yeah, much later than the extinction dates for many other megafauna species on the Australian mainland. Their late survival is attributed purely to their isolation from humans.
Until humans arrived on that island.
Exactly. People first arrived around 3,300 years ago, and the turtles went extinct about 300 years later. A clear cause and effect in a previously untouched territory.
Okay, compelling evidence from Australia. What about South America? We touch on Mexico, but continent-wide.
South America also offers growing evidence, often coming from re-examining existing museum collections.
Collections from long ago.
Yes, many originated from those major fossil trafficking operations between Argentina and Europe back in the 19th century. Re-looking at these old collections, specifically searching for signs of biological intervention, cut marks, fractures from humans or carnivores, is proving to be a valuable alternative method for research.
So, finding new evidence in old bones.
Exactly. One study looked at material from the Pampa region of Argentina, an area with complex geology and environmental changes, making the identification of human marks especially significant if found.
And did they find any?
Yes, a compelling example is the left humerus, the upper arm bone of Dodecurus, one of those giant glyptodonts.
What did they find on it?
Multiple cut marks. One was longer, about 3 centimeters. Others were 1 and 2 centimeters. They showed features like smears in both walls and asymmetric grooves, consistent with stone tool use.
Could the marks be recent damage?
No. Crucially, concretions of sediments were documented covering and surrounding some parts of the marks. This means the marks were made before the bone was buried and fossilized, confirming they were ancient.
What about other examples?
Another vertebra from a different glyptodont, Panoctus, showed 4 grooves on the same side, in the same distribution. Microscopic analysis revealed an asymmetrical groove and V-shape, characteristic of butchery marks.
And the location of the marks made sense.
Yes, the marks on the Dodecurus humerus relate to disarticulating the arm or removing muscle. On the Panoctus vertebra, they relate to removing the muscle pocket contained in the tail, like taking out the tenderloin. And again, evidence of these marks was found underneath other natural traces like sediment or weathering cracks, confirming their antiquity.
Are there examples from other parts of South America, too?
Yes, direct evidence is popping up elsewhere. Elvano, Venezuela, giant ground sloth bones show impact points and fractures. Gruta dos Brejos, Brazil, another ground sloth humerus with cut marks and fractures. Monteverde II in Chile, a famous early human site. Gomphothera humeri with possible cut marks. Cueva Fel, also in Chile, a ground sloth ulna with cut marks.
So it seems the pattern is repeating across the continent.
The accumulating data on extinction chronology in South America, though still needing critical analysis, strongly suggests humans did hunt megafauna there, and that the main extinction event, the LQE, generally happened after humans arrived.
Okay, so bringing it all together globally, that figure 1 graph again.
Yes, that diagram, megafauna loss versus global human population growth, serves as that powerful, concise visual summary for the overkill hypothesis. It gives that big picture perspective.
Remind us what it shows.
It plots the number of megafauna species, red line, against global human population, blue line, over the last 100,000 years.
And the key takeaway.
The striking inverse relationship. As human population, blue line, takes off exponentially, especially accelerating around 15,000, 10,000 years ago, the number of megafauna species, red line, simultaneously plummets.
And the timing matches human arrival in different regions.
Precisely. Australia, 50K. Eurasia Beringia, 50 to 15.5K. The Americas, 15.5, 11.5K onwards. This synchronized timing, where human expansion into new territories consistently precedes or coincides with major megafauna die-offs, is the cornerstone argument. It suggests a strong causal link. New predator arrives, naive prey disappears. The overall global pattern shown is rapid loss in regions experiencing sudden arrival of H. sapiens, with no overall correlation with climatic variation at this broad global scale, according to that model.
Okay, that lays out the overkill case very clearly.
Right.
But we know climate was changing dramatically, too. Let's reevaluate the climate change hypothesis now in more depth. How might shifting landscapes and vegetation changes have driven extinctions?
Right. The extinction of megafauna, especially those huge herbivores, wouldn't have just happened in isolation. It would have had profound ripple effects, ecological consequences, particularly on plant communities.
Because they were ecosystem engineers.
Exactly. They shaped the landscape through grazing, browsing, trampling. Their disappearance would kick off a cascade of changes in vegetation structure, composition, and dynamics.
What kind of changes?
Generally, 3 types are hypothesized. First, the loss of open vegetation and habitat mosaics. Landscapes that had been kept open, maybe like parklands or diverse mosaics of grassland and woodland, by constant herbivore pressure.
They would change without the grazers.
They'd likely be replaced by dense or closed formations. Think thicker woodlands or forests taking over. This leads to a shift from complex, fine-grained habitat diversity to more uniform or zonal vegetation patterns across large areas. Some argue these Pleistocene mosaics supported higher biodiversity, which was lost in the transition.
Okay, so denser vegetation, what's the second change?
Increased fire regimes. If you remove the mega herbivores, you get an accumulation of uncropped plant material, basically, more fuel building up. Combine that with potentially increased vegetation density, and the hypothesis is you'd get increased fire frequency and intensity.
Fire takes over the role of the herbivores.
In a way, yes. Fire might maintain some openness, but it's described as a more aggressive and less discriminating consumer than herbivores. It could lead to the loss of specific vegetation patterns and favor plants adapted to frequent burning, maybe pushing landscapes into new states like vast uniform grasslands maintained by fire.
Is there evidence for this increased fire after megafauna died off?
It's actually not consistent everywhere. In Australia, for example, there's surprisingly little evidence for increased fire linked to megafaunal extinction. Charcoal records there show complex patterns, but no strong or general increase in charcoal around human arrival and megafaunal extinction.
Why might that be?
Perhaps the vegetation changes after extinction? Maybe expansion of shrublands were too sparse to carry frequent fires under the cooler, drier, low CO2 conditions of the middle of the last glacial cycle when extinctions peaked there.
What about North America? Fire increased there.
Well, the pace of vegetation change certainly peaked between 13,000 and 10,000 years ago, right after the main megafaunal extinction window. Those spruce parkland and mixed parkland biomes, thought to be kept open by herbivores, declined rapidly then.
And fire.
Studies using those dung fungus spores found herbivore populations collapsed around 14,500 years ago before the Younger Dryas cooling. Interestingly, some studies noted that charcoal concentrations, possibly indicating human fire use, increased after the dung spores dropped off.
So maybe humans increased burning after the megafauna were gone.
Possibly. But the researchers note it's not clear that this increase in fire led to major habitat alteration on a scale that would explain the extinctions. And there's generally no evidence for extensive anthropogenically driven habitat alteration in the Americas coincident with the LQE. So the fire link is complex and maybe not a primary driver everywhere.
Okay, that brings us to this black mat enigma. What is this geological feature and how does it relate?
Right, the black mat. Across many parts of North America, sedimentary profiles from the end of the Pleistocene show this peculiar, thin, dark layer.
What makes it dark?
Higher organic matter content compared to the sediments just above and below it. And they consistently date to just before the onset of the Younger Dryas cold snap.
Where are they found?
Typically in low-lying spots, former marshes, wet meadows, ponds. They're generally thought to indicate a brief period of raised water tables.
Wetter conditions.
Yes, leading to soil saturation, ponding, and more organic matter getting preserved in muds and peats. They also often contain a high charcoal content. One idea is they were caused by reduced evaporation under the cooling conditions leading into the Younger Dryas, allowing groundwater to recharge more effectively.
But why are they so distinct to this specific time?
That remains puzzling. Why such a distinctive layer then, but not during other similar climatic events, like the earlier, oldest Dryas cold period?
What's the connection to the extinctions?
Crucially, observations show mammoth bones, for example, are often found directly beneath these black mats. They were blanketed by black mat deposits, showing the mats formed almost immediately after megaherbivore extinction.
So the timing lines up perfectly. Does it explain the extinction?
Not directly. The black mats themselves cannot diagnose that cause. As one researcher put it, it's so difficult to fathom how a short-lived increase in water availability could have wiped out mammoths, mastodons, and the rest.
So it's a consequence, not a cause.
Or at least it's a marker. Their unusual presence right at this critical juncture hints at something very strange, some unprecedented environmental and biotic disturbance happening around the time of the extinction.
Didn't someone link the black mats to an asteroid impact?
Yes, a more radical proposal suggested the black mats, along with other purported evidence like nanodiamonds, were debris from a catastrophic extraterrestrial impact event that supposedly caused the megafauna extinction, ended the Clovis culture, and triggered the Younger Dryas all at once.
Is that widely accepted?
No. That radical proposal is not widely accepted by the broader scientific community. Most researchers feel it lacks sufficient reproducible evidence and conceptual merit. The black mats are more likely related to terrestrial, hydrological, and ecological changes, even if the exact trigger remains debated.
Okay, so landscape changes and maybe weird events like the black mat formation are part of the climate picture. What about genetic insights into how these populations were doing before they vanished? Back to the woolly rhino.
Yes, the genetic studies provide crucial clues about the population status leading up to extinction. Remember that 18,500-year-old woolly rhino bone showed strong genetic diversity.
Right, suggesting a healthy population then.
Healthy and relatively stable, not suffering from inbreeding, which strongly suggests the decline that led to their extinction just 4,500 years later must have happened rapidly.
And the timing, again, points to
that rapid warming period around 14,000 years ago, rather than a long, slow decline caused by human hunting pressure that started much earlier. For the woolly rhino, climate seems to be the prime suspect based on this genetic timeline.
Does this pattern hold for other megafaunas? What do broader genetic studies show?
Looking across various megafaunal species reveals a clear pattern of pronounced dynamicism of genetic population structures over time throughout the whole late Pleistocene.
Meaning populations were fluctuating a lot anyway?
Yes, population booms and busts, bottlenecks where genetic diversity was lost, local extinctions from certain regions. These weren't rare events. They were common occurrences for many megafaunal genera, but the scale and timing varies across taxa, meaning different species responded differently.
Was there an overall trend towards the end?
Yes, a consistent finding is a progressive loss of genetic diversity toward the end of the Pleistocene. This happened in species that ultimately went extinct and in those that survived.
So even survivors were losing diversity?
Yes, although the severity differed. It was more pronounced in some taxa like bison, lions, muskox, wolves, compared to others like horses, mammoths, and saiga antelope. And the timing of these genetic declines also varied between species.
What does this imply about the causes of the final extinction?
It really complicates any simplistic single-cause explanation. It suggests that many megafaunal populations were already undergoing significant stress, dynamic changes in their genetic health, and population structure before the final extinction pulse.
So they might have been more vulnerable.
Exactly. It indicates multiple stressors were likely at play over long periods. The vulnerability or resilience of different species was likely influenced by their unique biology and their specific, varied responses to both environmental shifts and increasing human presence. Genetics gives us a much more nuanced view of this complex lead-up to the LQE.
Which leads us perfectly into the idea of the 1-2 punch and these more complex scenarios. It wasn't just one thing, but interacting factors and regional differences.
Precisely. Many paleontologists have moved away from that strict either stance. They increasingly conclude that neither overkill alone nor climate change alone is the full story.
So the combined hypothesis is gaining traction.
Yes, the combined climate change and human-induced hypothesis suggests that 1-2 punch, where human impacts and climatic changes acted together, often synergistically.
How might that have worked?
Well, we know climate change affected megafauna, population dynamics, and distributions, just like it affects smaller animals and plants. But climate change alone doesn't fully explain why most megafauna didn't go extinct in regions where climate change was arguably most severe, like high latitudes in Eurasia, or why they survived previous glacial cycles that were climatically similar, maybe even more extreme.
Suggesting climate wasn't the sole knockout blow.
It suggests climate alone might not be the full answer globally, and this is where comprehensive global analyses come in. These large-scale studies, looking at species-level data worldwide, provide strong support for hominin paleobiogeography as the critical factor.
Meaning human presence is key.
Yes, they find that modern human colonization of virgin territory is the more pervasive driver of extinction when you look at the worldwide geographical variation in how severe the extinctions were. Where naive fauna met modern humans, losses were highest.
The climate still played a role.
It seems so, especially when you look at interaction effects. The most effective statistical models, like a combined SAR model, included hominin presence, the degree of temperature change anomaly, and an interaction between the two.
What did that interaction show?
It showed that extinctions were intermediate in regions where archaic hominins and modern humans had coexisted for longer periods, but most severe where Homo sapiens arrived suddenly. Crucially, the model found that the temperature anomaly effect, the impact of climate change, was really only significant in those regions where there was already a long history of hominin megafauna coexistence.
So climate change might have been the final straw where animals were already somewhat adapted to humans, but human arrival itself was the main shock in new territories.
That's what the model implies. While human colonization was the primary global driver, climate change acted as an additional stressor, maybe pushing already pressured populations over the edge in places like Africa or parts of Eurasia where they'd developed some defenses against earlier hominins.
This highlights the regional differences, right?
Absolutely. Regional nuances are key. In southern South America, for instance, high extinction rates correlate with climate fluctuations, shifts between wet and dry periods, changes in savanna versus forest habitats. But there's no indication these fluctuations were necessarily greater than normal compared to previous cycles. So maybe climate pushed them, but human hunting was also happening.
And Australia.
In Australia, some argue that gradual drying over hundreds of thousands of years caused staggered extinctions before humans arrived. But other strong arguments point to modern humans as the cause, arriving around 50,000 years ago, either through hunting or maybe large-scale landscape burning, changing the vegetation.
So it's often hard to definitively separate the causes.
Very often. Studies frequently lack the data required to discredit either hypothesis completely, especially when looking at a single region in isolation. North America is a classic example. Human arrival, major climate shifts, and extinctions all happen in a very tight time frame, making it incredibly difficult to disentangle the precise contribution of each factor.
So the grain of discovery, figuring out the exact story for each species in each region, is still an ongoing detailed process.
A major scientific endeavor, yes.
Let's talk about Africa again, the anomalous case.
Yeah.
Why was it so different?
Africa really stands out as this fortunate anomaly. While some Pleistocene megafauna did go extinct there, about 10 genera, representing maybe 21% of the total.
Which is still significant, but less than other continents.
Much less. And for 7 of those 10 genera, the timing is very poorly constrained, just sometime in the last 100,000 years. 3 others actually went extinct more recently, during the Holocene.
Were the largest animals still hit hardest in Africa?
Yes, even in Africa, the species-level extinction was most intense for larger megafauna. It affected 40–50% of mammals over 1,000 kilograms. So size vulnerability still applied, but the overall devastation was lower.
And the reason is thought to be.
Coevolution. The widely accepted explanation is that long-term gradual coevolution between various hominins, including early Homo sapiens, and African megafauna gave the animals time to adapt.
Because humans originated there.
Exactly. African megafauna had hundreds of thousands, even millions of years to evolve with humans, to adapt their survival techniques to live successfully alongside humans. They weren't naive prey encountering a novel super predator for the first time.
Did earlier hominins cause extinctions in Africa?
There might have been some earlier pulses. For example, around 1 million years ago, during the early Pleistocene, Africa saw a reduction in elephant relatives and the loss of some large carnivores, possibly linked to Homo erectus becoming a more effective hunter or competitor. But even those earlier extinctions seem moderate in strength and speed relative to later extinctions elsewhere because of that long history of coevolution.
But this coevolution explanation creates a bit of a puzzle, doesn't it?
It does create a troubling paradox for a simple overkill model. Many large African animals today do not use cryptic habitats, they live out in the open, and many lack defensive behaviors that would deter armed group hunting humans.
So if they aren't hiding or fighting back effectively, why didn't Homo sapiens, with sophisticated tools and strategies, wipe them out like they supposedly did elsewhere?
That's the puzzle. If humans were so deadly elsewhere, why the relative lack of extinction in Africa? It prompts deeper speculation.
What are some possibilities?
Researchers offer a few ideas. Maybe the hunting strategies of early African hominins were different, less focused on the absolute largest animals. Or perhaps significant megafauna extinctions did happen in Africa much earlier, caused by pre-sapiens hominins, which effectively weeded out the most vulnerable species long before Homo sapiens began their global expansion. So the pool of naive megafauna was already reduced.
Interesting possibilities. Let's tackle some direct challenges to the traditional overkill idea now. What about the argument concerning broad diets and the scarcity of kill sites?
Right. Some critiques focus on the simplicity of early overkill models. Foraging theory suggests that extinction of prey solely due to overkill is actually highly unlikely if human diets were narrow, focused only on a few megafauna species.
Why? Because the hunters would starve if their prey vanished.
Exactly. Human populations would likely experience boom-bust dynamics tied to their main prey. In that scenario, the most likely outcome is that human populations will go extinct, not prey populations.
So who is the most dangerous predator for megafauna then?
The theory suggests it's omnivores. Generalist predators who can sustain themselves on smaller game, plants, fish, whatever, even when their preferred large prey becomes scarce. This allows them to maintain relentless hunting pressure.
So arguing that early humans had broad diets doesn't actually refute overkill.
Ironically, no. This insight suggests the traditional view of overkill, which sometimes portrayed Pleistocene humans as hyper-specialized big-game hunters causing voracious predation, might be flawed. Optimal foraging models actually predict that North American Paleo-Indians should have taken a wide array of animals and plants. Being a generalist is what makes a predator particularly dangerous to slow-reproducing prey.
What about the timing? Is the idea of a sudden simultaneous extinction event across North America actually supported?
That key premise of overkill, an abrupt and largely simultaneous event, has not been demonstrated, according to some critics, of the 37 genera that went extinct in North America.
How many are securely dated to that narrow Clovis window?
Only 17 genera are directly dated to 12,000 years ago. A significant number disappeared after the last glacial maximum, but still before 12,000 years ago. 7 went extinct before the LGM entirely, and 5 remain undated.
So potentially half the extinctions didn't happen right at the end.
It is not known whether 20 out of 37 genera survived into Clovis times, let alone whether they disappeared simultaneously. The picture might be much more staggered than a single blitzkrieg.
And relying on the last appearance date, LAD, in the fossil record is problematic.
Very much so. Just because the youngest known fossil of a species dates to, say, 13,000 years ago, doesn't mean the species actually went extinct at 13,000 years ago. It only means it was extinct by then. They could have died out thousands of years earlier, and we just haven't found a younger fossil yet. This senior-lips effect significantly hinders precise chronological understanding.
What about using the number of fossils as an indicator of population size?
Fossils themselves are not a direct indicator of past population sizes. Lots of factors influence fossilization and discovery, and while proxies like the dung fungus spores, Sporbarella, are used to estimate herbivore abundance,
They aren't species specific.
right, they're not specific to particular genera, making it hard to track individual populations, and there's no unambiguous way to translate the number of spores into past herbivore densities. It gives a general trend, but not precise numbers for specific species.
And how many of the extinct North American genera do we actually have archaeological proof of humans hunting?
This is a major point for critics. The archaeological record currently attests to the hunting of only 5 of the genera that went extinct in North America.
Only 5 out of 37.
Based on clear kill site evidence, yes. Plus, as mentioned, there's reason to suspect some genera vanished long before humans arrived. This limited direct evidence for widespread hunting of all the extinct megafauna provides, in the view of critics, a shaky foundation for claiming humans were solely or primarily responsible for all the extinctions.
Let's revisit the climate argument from this critical perspective, too. Just how severe was the climate change at the end of the Pleistocene?
It was significant. Driven by changes in Earth's orbit, there was increased incoming solar radiation in the northern hemisphere, starting around 20,000 years ago, peaking about 10,000 years ago. This, combined with rising levels of greenhouse gases, CO2, CH4, propelled global warming,
Leading to ice sheets melting.
Yes, North America's ice sheets started melting significantly around 16,500 years ago. This caused complex changes in temperature and precipitation patterns, sea level rise, and major reorganizations of biota. Ecosystems were shuffled around, described as a biogeographic free-for-all.
So if someone argues climate can't be the cause because megafauna survived previous cycles,
The counter-argument is you need to demonstrate that those prior climate changes were truly of the same severity, speed, and type of ecological reorganization as the Pleistocene-Holocene transition. And that has yet to be done. Maybe this specific transition was uniquely disruptive in ways earlier cycles were not.
and the genetic evidence we discussed earlier also fits here.
Yes, the genetic studies showing demographic fluctuations, bottlenecks, and loss of diversity happening in many megafaunas before widespread human arrival or the final climate shock, this suggests populations were already under stress.
Making them more vulnerable to whatever came next.
Exactly. Pre-existing stress could have made them much more susceptible to either increased human hunting pressure or the uniquely disruptive environmental changes at the end of the Pleistocene, or, most likely, the combination of both.
So the intensity of human predation and its exact consequences remain unresolved.
Largely unresolved, yes. While early humans clearly hunted megafauna, whether that hunting pressure alone was sufficient to cause extinction across dozens of species, or if it was a contributing factor alongside climate and habitat change, is still intensely debated.
And this debate has modern ethical implications.
Some argue it does. If humans were significantly responsible for these past extinctions, does that imply an ethical responsibility for us today? For example, should we pursue projects like Pleistocene rewilding, trying to restore large mammals and their ecological roles to places like North America? It adds another layer to the discussion.
Fascinating. Let's transition now to the aftermath. What were the ecological consequences of losing all these giant animals, and what's the relevance for us today?
Right. The extinction of megafauna, especially those big herbivores, wasn't just about losing species. It triggered profound ecological consequences, often called trophic cascades.
Ripple effects through the food web.
Exactly. The indirect effects of losing species at one level, like megaherbivores, on other levels, like plants or carnivores. It creates a ripple effect throughout the entire ecosystem, changing its structure and function.
Like the vegetation changes we talked about.
Yes. With the disappearance of those keystone large herbivores, the constant grazing and browsing pressure that maintained diverse open landscapes vanished. This led to the replacement of open vegetation and habitat mosaics by dense or closed formations. And the accumulation of uneaten plant fuel likely contributed to increased fire regimes, further altering vegetation patterns. That decline of parkland biomes in North America is a prime example.
What about the impact on carnivores?
Losing the megaherbivores meant a massive reduction in the prey base for the megacarnivores. This likely triggered cascades of extinctions among the large predators themselves, leading to their decline or disappearance. Remember, North America lost all 9 of its megacarnivore species.
So it's a trophic downgrading.
Or trophic simplification, yes. Entire top trophic levels, megaherbivores, were lost, and the next level down, megacarnivores, was either lost or severely diminished.
Do these past changes still affect ecosystems today?
They absolutely do. The consequences of that simplification still resonate, affecting the structure, composition, and functioning of ecosystems, even ones we consider wild today. Scientists talk about ecological anachronisms.
Anachronisms.
Yeah.
Like things out of time.
Sort of. Examples include plants that evolved large fruits to be dispersed by giant mammals that no longer exist, leading to seed dispersal anachronisms, or plants that are still replete with defenses, thorns, toxins for herbivores that vanished thousands of years ago.
Or scavengers without enough large carcasses.
Exactly. Condors, in continental settings, for instance, evolved alongside abundant megafauna carcasses. Their populations may now be limited by the lack of this natural food source, reflecting a disrupted ecological partnership.
Okay, so losing megafauna changed ecosystems. Could the megafauna themselves have actually influenced the climate?
That's a fascinating and relatively newer area of research, the idea that animals, especially large herds of megafauna, could influence climate through things like biogeochemical cycling and greenhouse gas emissions.
Like methane from digestion.
Precisely. Wild animals, including megafauna, produce substantial amounts of methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas. Researchers have tried to model this, predicting detectable decreases in the global methane budget linked to the extinction of Pleistocene megaherbivores.
How much would it affect?
One estimate suggests the loss of megafauna contributed to a global cooling of 0.080.20 degrees C. Not huge, but potentially significant. This modeled decrease in methane seems reflected in ice core data, showing an abrupt drop in the atmospheric concentration of methane around that time, and also a change in the isotopic signature of atmospheric methane, suggesting a shift away from herbivore sources towards wetland sources.
Could this have contributed to climate events like the Younger Dryas?
Some studies even suggest that the abrupt end-Pleistocene megafauna extinction could have contributed to the Younger Dryas cold episode by suddenly reducing this greenhouse gas input.
What other ways could they influence climate? Through vegetation.
Yes, by altering vegetation and soil structures through trampling or browsing. We discussed how their removal led to increased woody vegetation. This shift would have acted as a sink of atmospheric CO2, pulling carbon out of the atmosphere as forests grew.
Which would cause cooling.
Potentially, yes, further contributing to a greenhouse cooling effect.
Could they affect climate through reflectivity, albedo?
Yes, especially at high latitudes. Think about snowy regions. Trees are dark features that stick out above bright, reflective snow. Fewer trees mean higher albedo, more reflection, more cooling. More trees mean lower albedo, less reflection, more warming.
So if megafauna kept landscapes open, preventing tree growth,
their extinction, allowing woody vegetation to expand, might have reduced albedo. Studies have tried to estimate this, suggesting albedo-related global warming impacts of up to 0.2 degrees C after the extinctions in high latitudes, because the darker tree-covered surface absorbed more solar radiation.
So the methane effect caused cooling, but the albedo effect caused warming.
At a global scale, yes, they seem to work in opposite directions, making the net effect complex. However, at lower latitudes or locally, things might be different. If more trees lead to more evapotranspiration and cloud formation, which is reflective, losing megafauna might cause net cooling there. Plus, large animals alter albedo just by trampling snow and grazing, even without trees.
Is there any real-world test of these ideas?
There is. The Pleistocene Park experiment in Yakutia, Siberia. They've reintroduced large herbivores, horses, bison, reindeer into an area of tundra.
And what odds?
The results are striking. The herbivores trample the snow in winter, compacting it. This drastically reduces soil insulation, leading to much colder soil temperatures by an impressive 15-20 degrees C.
Wow, keeping the permafrost colder.
Exactly. Plus, their grazing removes darker shrubs, exposing the bright snow, which significantly increasing the albedo. This increased reflectivity cools the surface locally. Both effects help keep the vast stores of carbon locked safely in the permafrost, preventing decomposition and release as greenhouse gases.
So megafauna could have had complex interacting effects on past climate.
Definitely. A full understanding, which is still developing, needs to integrate all these factors. Methane emissions, changes in soil emissions, albedo changes, evapotranspiration changes linked to vegetation structure. It's a big puzzle.
This all leads directly to modern relevance, particularly the idea of rewilding. How can learning about these past ecosystems help us today?
The insights from past megafaunal declines are critically important. They offer practical insights and applications for the Anthropocene because, tragically, megafauna definition continues in many parts of the world right now.
So conservation science can learn from the LQE.
Immensely. We can learn about the long-term consequences of the extirpation of large-bodied species from ecosystems. For example, in the Amazon today, overhunting of large seed dispersers like monkeys and tapirs is predicted to cause a long-term decline in large, high-biomass tree species, which reduces the forest's ability to store carbon, even if the forest looks intact structurally.
And studying the past helps us think about restoration.
Yes, it presents an opportunity to explore how to rebuild the ecosystem functions provided by large animals. That's the core idea behind rewilding.
What exactly is rewilding?
It's an ecological restoration strategy that often uses species introductions to restore top-down trophic interactions, like bringing back large predators or herbivores, with the aim of promoting self-regulating biodiverse ecosystems, letting nature manage itself more, guided by these key large animals.
Are there examples of this working? Are megafauna coming back anywhere?
In some parts of the world, yes. Societal changes, like land abandonment or changing attitudes, have actually facilitated more or less spontaneous megafauna comebacks. Think about brown bears and wolves expanding their ranges in parts of Europe and North America.
Showing that coexistence is possible.
It suggests that modern landscapes might offer greater possibilities for human-megafauna coexistence than we often assume.
What are the potential benefits of successful rewilding?
Restored megafaunas and the trophic cascades they trigger can potentially provide increased ecological resilience against climate change in some cases. They might help other species adapt by increasing seed dispersal distances, for example.
Could their absence increase extinction risk for other species?
Yes, the loss of megafauna may increase extinction risk for associated species that depend on them. Conversely, having large herbivores back can confer greater resistance toward ecosystem shifts under climate change, like slowing down the shrubbification of Arctic tundra or the woody encroachment of natural savannas.
But it's complex. Sometimes they could accelerate change.
Potentially. High megafauna abundance could also facilitate regime shifts in other scenarios, like helping shift a forest to a savanna if the climate is also drying. It depends on the context.
Can rewilding help control invasive species?
It can. Restored megafaunas can provide increased ecological resilience against invasive species, often through top-down control of invasive medium-sized carnivores. A classic example cited is the dingo in Australia.
Dingoes aren't native, are they?
Technically exotic, yes, but they function as a top predator now. By suppressing invasive smaller predators like foxes and cats, and maybe invasive herbivores, dingoes have been reported to have positive effects on a range of native species. It shows how restoring trophic structure can have benefits, even with non-native components sometimes.
Is rewilding science well developed?
There's a lot of excitement, but the scientific literature remains dominated by opinion pieces and other non-empirical work. There's a strong call for much more empirical rewilding work, actual experiments, rigorous hypothesis testing.
What are the key research needs?
Understanding trophic complexity, how it interacts with landscape setting, climate change, human activities, and really developing the potential global scope for rewilding. Where can it work? How should it be done?
So the parallels between the late Pleistocene and today are quite stark.
They really are. Today, we see contemporary direct human pressures on megafaunal populations, coinciding, once again, with an episode of potentially rapid climate change. Our deep dive into these past extinctions provides crucial frameworks, crucial context for understanding these complex interactions today and for designing effective conservation and restoration strategies for the future.
Okay, we have covered a huge amount of ground. We've journeyed through this intricate, compelling, and frankly often tragic story of the late quaternary megafauna extinction. We've explored the two main contenders, human overkill and climate change. We've seen how modern science, with these incredible micromethods, advanced dating, isotopes, ancient DNA, paleoproteomics, is painting a much more detailed, nuanced picture than that simple either debate ever allowed.
It's moving beyond that dichotomy.
Right. And as history enthusiasts, you listening have hopefully gained a deep appreciation for the complex interplay of factors, the timing, the location, the specific species, the human actions, the environmental pressures that led to the disappearance of these colossal creatures.
And it's really crucial to remember this isn't just ancient history frozen in time. It holds profound relevance for right now.
How so? What's the big takeaway?
Well, if the past teaches us anything, it's that a combined 1-2 punch of significant human impact and a rapidly changing climate can lead to widespread, devastating extinction events, especially for the largest animals.
Which forces us to look at our own planet today.
With new eyes, doesn't it? We are currently living through another period of rapid global warming, arguably faster than the end of the Ice Age, and a period of absolutely unprecedented human influence on practically every ecosystem on Earth.
So, the lingering question, the provocative thought perhaps, is what echoes of the late Pleistocene do you hear in our present environmental challenges?
And thinking about that deep history, what profound responsibility might it lay at our feet for the planet's future, knowing what we now know about the potential consequences of our actions combined with climate shifts?
This deep dive really shows that the past isn't just a collection of long-dead facts. It's a living lesson, constantly being updated by new science.
Absolutely. And it raises questions for the future, too. What new discoveries about ancient life might still shift our understanding of modern ecosystems?
And how might these ghosts of megafauna past, as we understand them better and better, actually guide our actions? How could they inspire our approach to biodiversity, conservation, and maybe even rewilding in this challenging Anthropocene epoch?
That's really the question to ponder, isn't it? Something to explore long after this deep dive concludes.